I never imagined a single afternoon could unravel everything I thought I knew about my relationship. One moment, I was at Alex's family BBQ, laughing at the little jokes and sharing stories with his parents, and the next, I felt my entire world tilt on its axis. It started innocently, or so I thought. Alex, my boyfriend of 14 months, had recently made a risky career change, leaving a stable corporate job to join a startup developing AI tools for small businesses. He was excited, hopeful, and confident. I was proud of him. But that pride quickly twisted into disbelief. Callie, Alex's childhood best friend, a fiercely protective, charming, and manipulative woman, decided it was the perfect moment to voice her opinion. Loud enough for the entire patio to hear, she said, "Alex is an idiot if he thinks that career move will work out. Startups fail 90% of the time. He's going to be unemployed in 6 months. Amber, I mean Alex, deserves better than someone who makes reckless financial decisions." The words hit like a punch. Not subtle teasing, not friendly advice. This was deliberate humiliation in front of his family. I froze, staring at Callie, then at Alex, expecting him to defend himself. But he didn't. Instead, Alex's eyes flickered with discomfort, and my heart sank further when I saw him glance at me, silently pleading for me to say nothing. And then it happened. He said, "Callie, that's not really your place to say." Callie tilted her head, adopting that wounded, "I only care for you" look, and I felt my stomach drop. "I'm just trying to protect Alex," she insisted, her tone calm, precise, manipulative. And just like that, Alex, the man I loved, chose to side with Callie rather than stand with me. I knew in that instant that everything had changed. I had to decide, tolerate disrespect in silence or stand up for myself. And when Alex asked me to apologize to Callie for daring to feel offended, I made my choice. I didn't speak another word. I walked away, leaving the laughter, the family, and the illusion of normalcy behind. That afternoon, I realized something painful and powerful. Sometimes loyalty isn't what you think it is, and the people closest to us aren't always the ones we can trust. I didn't know it yet, but this was only the beginning of a journey that would test my patience, my heart, and my understanding of love itself. My name is Rachel Mills. I'm 30. And for as long as I can remember, I've believed in loyalty, honesty, and the kind of love that makes life feel full. I met Alex, my boyfriend at the time, 14 months ago at a mutual friend's party. He was charming, thoughtful, and effortlessly kind, a combination I hadn't seen in anyone before. Our connection was instant, electric, yet comfortable, like finding a missing puzzle piece you didn't even know was lost. Alex is 32, a marketing executive with a sharp mind and a warm smile that can make you forget your worries. I was immediately drawn to his intelligence and his subtle humor. But it wasn't just him, it was the way he carried himself, the way he treated others with genuine respect, the way his family welcomed me like I had always belonged. I thought I knew him completely. Then there was Callie, Alex's best friend since college. She's 31, a graphic designer, vivacious, and effortlessly persuasive. From the start, I sensed something off. Callie had this way of inserting herself into every aspect of Alex's life, but she masked it with charm and concern. She was always there, offering advice, opinions, and sometimes unsolicited commentary, especially about me. At first, I laughed it off. She's protective of Alex, I told myself. That's normal. The first few months were blissful. Alex and I shared countless weekends exploring Charlotte, cooking dinner together, and laughing until our ribs ached. We were happy, or at least I thought we were. His family adored me. His parents, Linda and Robert, were warm and welcoming, making me feel like I had joined a world I'd never expected to enter. I felt seen, valued, loved. But little cracks began to appear. Callie would drop comments during casual conversations, subtle jabs at my choices, my priorities, even my career. "Are you sure he should be leaving his stable job for that startup?" she asked casually one evening, smiling sweetly. I shrugged it off, but inside a small knot of unease formed. I noticed the way Alex would sometimes hesitate, deferring to Callie's opinion over mine. Another time, she criticized a decision I had made for our weekend plans, making it seem like I was careless or naive. I tried talking to Alex about it, expecting him to reassure me, but he minimized it. "She's just looking out for me," he said. And just like that, I learned a dangerous lesson. When someone manipulates loyalty under the guise of care, it's easy for even the kindest hearts to overlook the truth. Alex and I were deeply involved. We shared our dreams, our fears, and our vulnerabilities. Yet Callie was always there, subtly shaping his perceptions, isolating him from honest feedback, ensuring her presence was indispensable. I began to notice patterns: dates cut short, sudden emergencies, and persistent justifications for her interference. Yet I loved Alex, so I tried to trust him, tried to ignore the growing tension gnawing at me. I also had my own life, friends who knew me well, a job that challenged and fulfilled me, a family who had always been my anchor. I prided myself on being independent and strong. Yet the more I invested in Alex, the more I realized how delicate the balance was between love and manipulation. Callie was like a shadow over our relationship, invisible to some, but unmistakable to anyone paying attention. Looking back, the red flags were there from the start, tiny, almost imperceptible, but I dismissed them, believing that love and trust could smooth over any rough edges. I didn't yet understand how powerful manipulation disguised as loyalty could be, nor how deeply it could shape someone's decisions. That realization, I would learn, would come in a painfully direct way at Alex's family BBQ. The tension didn't appear overnight. It crept in slowly, like a shadow stretching across a sunlit room. At first, I chalked it up to coincidence or my own sensitivity. But Callie's presence in Alex's life was becoming more than just friendly involvement. It was a constant, intrusive force shaping his decisions, opinions, and even his reactions toward me. It started subtly. Callie would text Alex during our dates with urgent advice or emergencies that seemed manufactured. She had a knack for creating a crisis just when our time together was most peaceful. Once, during a Friday night dinner, Alex excused himself repeatedly to answer her messages. Each time, he reassured me it was nothing serious, yet the pattern became undeniable. I noticed the little manipulations too, the way she framed her opinions as concern, her laughter when I hesitated to challenge her, the innocent-sounding comments that slowly undermined my confidence in Alex. "Are you sure he's right about that?" She'd ask casually about a work decision or a weekend plan. And Alex, polite and trusting, would nod, sometimes deferring to her judgment without consulting me. Family gatherings magnified the problem. At Alex's parents' house, Callie was always present, slipping into conversations, offering opinions on everything from finances to personal boundaries. I could see the way she positioned herself as indispensable, not just to Alex, but to everyone around him. His parents were kind, but sometimes naive, failing to notice the subtle ways she was influencing him and marginalizing my role in his life. It wasn't just interference, it was control disguised as loyalty. The first time I consciously realized it, Alex had been planning a weekend getaway for us. Callie called, claiming a personal crisis that required his help. He hesitated, torn between his loyalty to me and his sense of obligation to her. I watched, frustrated, as he ultimately excused himself, leaving me feeling secondary in his own life. There were arguments, too. Not explosive fights, but tense conversations where boundaries were tested. I tried discussing my discomfort with Alex, explaining how Callie's constant involvement made me uneasy. He would always respond with, "She's been in my life forever. She just wants to protect me." His words were gentle, but I felt my concerns shrink under their weight. It was clear that in his mind, loyalty to Callie came first, and any challenge to that loyalty seemed like an attack. Even his friends noticed. On several occasions, mutual acquaintances would comment quietly, "Callie seems a little controlling." But Alex would brush it off, insisting she was simply protective. I began to feel trapped between my love for Alex and the reality that someone else was quietly dictating the terms of our relationship. By the time the family BBQ arrived, I had seen enough patterns to feel a knot of dread. Callie's behavior wasn't occasional or harmless. It was deliberate, consistent, and strategic. She was shaping Alex's perceptions, steering his decisions, and subtly isolating him from me. The tension in the air that Saturday was palpable, even before the infamous comment that would finally ignite the confrontation. Looking back, the signs were everywhere. The interrupted dates, the unsolicited advice, the subtle undermining. I had sensed something was wrong, but the gravity of the situation didn't hit until it all collided in front of Alex's family. And that collision would reveal not just Callie's manipulations, but also the fragile foundation on which Alex and I had built our relationship. The family barbecue had started like any other weekend gathering. Laughter echoing through the backyard, the smell of grilled food mixing with summer air, and Alex's parents welcoming me warmly, as they always did. For a moment, I allowed myself to relax, to believe that today could be just another happy memory. But Callie had other plans. Alex was explaining his recent career move, leaving a secure corporate role to join a startup developing AI tools for small businesses. He spoke with excitement and confidence, detailing the risks and rewards, his vision for the future, and why this felt like the right step for him. I watched him, feeling proud and supportive, ready to celebrate his ambition. Then, as if rehearsed, Callie decided it was time to intervene. She leaned back in her chair, took a sip of her drink, and said, loud enough for everyone to hear, "Alex is an idiot if he thinks that career move will work out. Startups fail 90% of the time. He's going to be unemployed in 6 months, and then what? He doesn't deserve to risk his stability, and frankly, you all should know better than to let him make such reckless decisions." A stunned silence fell over the patio. Alex's family paused mid-bite, their eyes flicking between us, uncertain how to react. I felt my chest tighten, my heart pounding. This wasn't playful teasing or concerned advice. It was a calculated humiliation, delivered in front of everyone he cared about. I tried to stay calm, my hands trembling slightly as I kept my voice level. "Excuse me, Callie. I didn't ask for your opinion about Alex's career choices." My words felt small, inadequate against the force of her intrusion, but they were all I could muster. Callie tilted her head, her expression that practiced mix of innocence and superiority. "I'm just being honest. Someone needs to protect Alex. I've seen too many people take advantage of him." Her tone was calm, almost caring, but the manipulation was clear. And before I could speak again, Alex, my boyfriend, looked away, hesitating, caught between defending me and placating his longtime friend. I turned to him, expecting him to shut this down, to stand beside me. But his face was conflicted, his voice quiet. "Callie, that's not really your place," he said, not with authority, but with hesitation, as if unsure which side to choose. My stomach dropped. This was the moment that revealed the real imbalance. Callie had a hold on him, a subtle but powerful influence that I had underestimated. The conversation escalated. Callie leaned forward, her tone sharpened, with controlled intensity. "I care about Alex. I've watched him get hurt by people who don't have his best interests at heart. You're being too sensitive, Rachel." I froze. Too sensitive? My emotions twisted inside me. Shock, hurt, anger, disbelief. I could feel the heat rising to my cheeks, my hands clenching into fists at my sides. This wasn't just disrespect. It was a betrayal of everything I thought our relationship represented. And Alex, he didn't correct her, didn't defend me. "Alex," I said, voice firm but trembling, "this is unacceptable. She insulted me in front of your family, and instead of supporting me, you're letting her justify it?" Alex sighed, conflicted, trying to balance loyalty to Callie with the tension now thick in the air. "She's just trying to protect me, Rachel. She's been in my life forever." I felt a sharp pang of reality. The person I had loved, the man I had trusted, had allowed someone else's influence to undermine our bond. That realization hit harder than Callie's words themselves. In that moment, I understood that our relationship wasn't just facing a challenge. It was being systematically compromised by someone Alex trusted more than me. I made my decision instantly. I would not apologize to Callie for standing up for myself. I would not accept a dynamic where my feelings were secondary to someone else's control over Alex. "This isn't going to work," I said quietly, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside me. I turned and walked away, leaving the laughter, the family, and the illusion of normalcy behind. That afternoon, I learned a painful truth. Sometimes, the person you love most may not protect you when it matters, and sometimes, walking away is the only way to preserve your dignity and self-respect. Walking to the front yard, away from the laughter and the smell of grilled food, I felt like I had just been knocked off my feet. My hands were clammy, my chest tight, and my mind raced in 1,000 directions at once. How could Alex, the man I trusted, let Callie, someone who wasn't even part of our romantic relationship, undermine me so publicly? My thoughts spiraled. I took a deep breath, trying to steady my heartbeat. Did I overreact? I wondered briefly, the question nagging at the edges of my pride. But the moment replayed vividly in my mind. Callie's smirk, Alex's hesitation, the uncomfortable silence of his family. No, I hadn't overreacted. The humiliation had been real, deliberate, and deeply hurtful. I thought back to all the subtle moments over the past 14 months, the texts interrupting our dates, the calls during our dinners, the way Alex would sometimes defer to Callie instead of me. Each memory was a small thread, and now, woven together, they formed a picture I couldn't ignore. Callie had been exerting influence over our relationship from the beginning, and Alex had allowed it. What did I do wrong? I asked myself, searching for a flaw in my behavior. Was I too sensitive, too demanding? No. I had simply expected respect, a basic acknowledgement of my feelings. Instead, I was made to feel like the problem for being offended by public disrespect. The weight of that realization pressed down on me, heavy and suffocating. I glanced back toward the house. Alex was standing there, frozen, watching me leave. His expression was a mix of confusion, guilt, and perhaps regret. But his eyes quickly flicked back to Callie, who now wore a triumphant expression, as if she had won some silent battle. The sight twisted something deep inside me. Hurt, anger, disbelief, and a piercing sense of betrayal all at once. I tried to calm myself, pacing back and forth, replaying the conversation in my head. I needed clarity. This isn't just about one comment at a BBQ, I told myself. This is about respect, boundaries, and loyalty. Callie had manipulated Alex, and Alex had allowed it. By defending her over me, he had shown exactly where his priorities lay. I thought about all the future plans we had made, the trips, the quiet evenings together, the dreams we had shared. Could I really build a life with someone who wouldn't stand up for me when it mattered most? Could I trust him if, at the first sign of conflict, he chose someone else's comfort over our relationship? My answer, though painful, was clear. I remembered my parents' advice growing up. Never compromise your dignity for anyone, and never allow someone to define your worth. Callie had tried to assert control, and Alex had allowed it. I realized then that staying silent, forgiving, or apologizing to keep the peace would have been a betrayal of myself. My hands tightened into fists at my sides, not in anger, but in determination. I would not be complicit in this dynamic. I would not compromise my self-respect for a relationship where my feelings were secondary. I had loved Alex, genuinely, deeply, and it hurt more than words could describe that he had failed to protect me. Finally, I exhaled, letting the tension leave my body. I walked back to the patio, nodded politely to his family, who looked mortified by the unfolding drama, and left without a backward glance. Every step felt both heavy and liberating. The shock of betrayal was raw, but so was the clarity of self-preservation. Driving home, I felt the ache in my chest, the deep, gnawing pain of realizing someone you love may not see your value. But beneath it, a seed of resolve took root. I knew that no matter what, I would not allow this violation of trust to define me. I would honor myself first. By the time I reached my apartment, the initial shock had faded into a quiet, simmering determination. The situation with Callie and Alex wasn't over, not entirely, but I had made a choice. I would not compromise my dignity or self-worth, even for someone I loved. That night, I lay in bed, heart heavy, mind racing, but with a sense of clarity forming amid the hurt. Some battles aren't worth fighting if they require sacrificing who you are. The days following the BBQ were a blur of confusion, anger, and quiet reflection. I hadn't heard from Alex since that afternoon, and that silence weighed on me heavier than any confrontation could have. At first, I told myself he was processing, trying to understand the gravity of what had happened. But soon, I realized that silence was not contemplation. It was avoidance. By Monday evening, I received a call from Alex's mother, Linda. Her voice was gentle but tinged with concern. "Rachel, honey, we just wanted to check on you after what happened on Saturday. Are you okay?" Her words, soft as they were, carried a weight of judgment for the entire situation. I told her I was managing, though the truth was, I felt shaken to my core. Linda and her husband, Robert, invited me over that evening, asking to speak privately. As I drove to their house, I tried to anticipate the conversation. Was Alex in trouble? Were they going to pressure me to reconcile? My mind spun with possibilities. When I arrived, I found them sitting in the living room, their expressions serious, almost hesitant. "Rachel, we've never done anything like this before," Linda began. "But after Saturday, we felt it was important to speak honestly. We think you need to know the full context of what's been happening with Callie." My stomach twisted. I had already pieced together the manipulations from my own observations, but hearing it from them made it visceral. They explained that Callie had consistently interfered in every serious relationship Alex had over the past 5 years. Every single one. She would create drama, criticize the partners publicly, and subtly undermine their confidence. And every time, Alex would defer to her, often unconsciously, because he had been conditioned to prioritize Callie's feelings over anyone else's. Jessica, Alex's younger sister, who had also joined the conversation, leaned forward. "Rachel, Callie has been in love with Alex for years, but instead of confronting him directly, she sabotages every relationship he forms. She makes herself indispensable by creating problems and then positioning herself as the solution. Every time Alex got close to someone, she intervened." The words hit me like a physical blow. The little knots of suspicion and unease I had felt over the past year suddenly transformed into a coherent, terrifying pattern. Callie hadn't just been over-involved. She had been deliberately controlling, orchestrating Alex's life and relationships for her own benefit. Robert, Alex's father, added another layer. "She's even read his private messages, Rachel. Anytime Alex's partner is serious about him, Callie uses the information to manipulate situations. She creates guilt, confusion, or crises that force him to prioritize her needs above everyone else's." I sat there, stunned, trying to process the magnitude of this revelation. My mind replayed every moment, every subtle interference, every inexplicable anxiety Alex seemed to feel about me spending too much time with him. It all made sense now. Callie had been in the background, always present, always calculating, and Alex had been, unknowingly, complicit in her scheme. Jessica's voice grew quieter, but her words carried a weight that settled in my chest. "We tried to warn him in the past, but every time Alex would defend Callie. He would shut down any criticism of her, claiming it was loyalty. He didn't see it as manipulation. And she's very skilled at making him believe he owes her everything, including his personal boundaries." Tears pricked my eyes, not just from the betrayal, but from the clarity it provided. For months I had felt like something was off, yet I had second-guessed myself, thinking maybe I was too sensitive, too controlling, too demanding. But this was not my fault. I hadn't imagined the manipulation. I had simply been the target. Linda leaned forward, her eyes softening. "Rachel, you are the first person who walked away instead of tolerating this. Most people stay, apologize, compromise themselves. You have a backbone. That's why we wanted you to know the full story, so you understand what you were really dealing with." My hands tightened in my lap, a mix of frustration, sorrow, and a strange sense of empowerment coursing through me. This wasn't just about a single argument at a family BBQ. This was about recognizing manipulation, asserting boundaries, and refusing to be complicit in someone else's control over a person I loved. Over the next few hours, they outlined the pattern of interference, from financial exploitation, Callie borrowing money and never repaying, to physical closeness that crossed boundaries, like cuddling on the couch during movies in Alex's absence. Each detail added to the weight of my realization. Every instinct I had ever ignored was right. Every uneasy feeling, every small red flag, had been a warning. I left their house that night with my mind spinning, but with a newfound clarity. The man I had loved had been under a spell of control for years, and by the time I realized it, I had already made the hardest choice, walking away. I understood now why Alex had not defended me. He hadn't been fully aware of the manipulation, conditioned to see Callie's control as loyalty, and I had no power to change that conditioning. Sitting in my car, I allowed myself to feel the full spectrum of emotion: grief for what I had lost, anger at the situation, and relief that I had not compromised myself. The storm had escalated far beyond a single insult at a BBQ. It had revealed a long-term, toxic dynamic that I could not have survived in without losing myself. For the first time, I felt a strange mix of sorrow and strength. The betrayal cut deep, but it also illuminated a path forward. I had clarity, understanding, and the knowledge that my dignity was intact. And though the confrontation with Alex and Callie was far from over, I knew I would face it with resolve, not fear. The week after learning the full extent of Callie's manipulations, I felt as though I were walking through a fog of despair. Every memory of my time with Alex now carried a shadow of doubt. Moments that once made me smile, the quiet evenings at his apartment, our shared coffee rituals, the little jokes only we understood, now seemed tainted. I began questioning everything. Had any of it been genuine, or was it all carefully orchestrated by someone else's hand, with Alex as an unknowing pawn? At night, when the apartment was quiet and the hum of the refrigerator filled the space, I found myself replaying every detail, every text, every interaction. I realized how much energy I had spent justifying Callie's behavior in my mind, making excuses for Alex's hesitations. He's just trying to be polite. He doesn't see it that way. Maybe I'm overreacting. Every rationalization now felt like a betrayal of myself. Isolation became a constant companion. My friends, though supportive, could only understand so much. I couldn't fully explain the complexity of the manipulation without sounding paranoid. And Alex, he was absent, leaving only the echoes of what could have been and the weight of unanswered questions. Each time my phone buzzed with no message from him, a wave of panic would wash over me. Had I made a mistake leaving? Was I too harsh, too rigid? But deep down, I knew my instincts had been correct. The darkest moment came on Thursday night. I was sitting on my couch, wrapped in a blanket, staring at the dim glow of the city lights outside my window. My chest ached, a deep, relentless pain that felt physical. I felt abandoned, betrayed, not just by Alex, who had failed to defend me, but by the illusion of the life I thought I had. The betrayal was compounded by helplessness. I could not control Alex's choices, nor could I undo Callie's influence. Tears came unbidden. I allowed myself to cry, to acknowledge the full depth of the hurt. My mind raced with questions I had no answers for. Why did he choose her over me? How could he not see her manipulation? What does this say about our future? Did I even know him at all? The realization that someone you love can unwittingly cause you such pain without malice or intent is a peculiar cruelty. I felt utterly alone. Even when surrounded by friends or family, the weight of the betrayal lingered, invisible but suffocating. I questioned my worth, wondering why I had been caught in the crossfire of someone else's obsession. Was I not enough? Did I fail somehow? These questions gnawed at me relentlessly, eroding the confidence I had built over years. Sleep offered little solace. Dreams were filled with scenarios where I confronted Callie and Alex, only to have every attempt thwarted. In my mind, I was trapped in an endless loop of confrontation and rejection, unable to assert my dignity. Every morning, I woke with a renewed sense of grief, the memory of the BBQ and the revelations from Alex's family replaying in vivid detail. But amidst the despair, a faint ember of clarity persisted. I began to recognize the difference between guilt and responsibility. The pain was real, but it was not a reflection of my failure. I had acted with integrity, with honesty, and with respect for myself. The darkness, though overwhelming, was a crucible forging resilience. By the weekend, I found a fragile strength. I began writing in my journal again, documenting every emotion, every thought. The act of putting pen to paper allowed me to externalize the chaos in my mind, giving shape to the storm I felt inside. Each entry was a step toward reclaiming my sense of self, a declaration that I would not be defined solely by this betrayal. Sitting there, surrounded by the quiet of my apartment, I made a vow to myself. I would navigate the aftermath with clarity and dignity. I would not let the manipulation of Callie or the indecision of Alex dictate my worth. Though I felt broken, I knew the darkness was temporary. It was a necessary step, a momentary collapse before the rise. The experience had stripped away illusions, forcing me to confront uncomfortable truths. And though the path forward was uncertain, one thing became crystal clear. My integrity, my boundaries, and my self-respect were non-negotiable. I was hurt, yes, but I was not defeated. Monday morning brought with it an unexpected clarity. After days of sitting in the fog of doubt and despair, a single thought crystallized. I deserve better. Not because I was perfect, but because I had acted with honesty, integrity, and courage. Qualities that Alex had failed to recognize in that critical moment at the BBQ. It started with a call from Jessica, Alex's sister. She had been the quiet observer in all of this, the one who had seen the patterns of Callie's manipulations for years. "Rachel," she said softly, "I think you need to see something before you make any further decisions. I have proof of the ways Callie has been controlling Alex, and I want you to know it's not just my opinion." I agreed to meet her at a quiet cafe later that day. Sitting across from her, I felt a mix of anticipation and anxiety. Jessica handed me a folder filled with screenshots, messages, and even photos documenting Callie's interference, showing how she had inserted herself into Alex's personal life, monitored his communication, and manipulated situations to ensure he remained dependent on her. As I flipped through the folder, a mixture of shock, anger, and vindication surged through me. Every instinct I had, doubted, every uncomfortable feeling I had brushed aside was validated in black and white. Callie's influence was extensive and calculated, and Alex's failure to defend me was not a minor lapse. It was a systemic pattern of prioritizing her over the people who genuinely cared about him. Jessica looked at me, her eyes earnest. "Rachel, this is why you did the right thing. You walked away, not because you overreacted, but because you recognized your worth. Most people in your position would have stayed, apologized, compromised themselves. You didn't. That's strength." The realization hit me with the force of a tidal wave. For weeks I had blamed myself, questioned my reactions, wondered if I had been too harsh. Now, seeing the undeniable evidence, I understood that my actions had been rooted in self-respect and clarity. I had recognized toxicity and refused to be complicit, a choice far rarer than most people appreciated. I also realized that this turning point wasn't just about Alex or Callie. It was about me reclaiming agency over my life. For too long, I had allowed the expectations, opinions, and manipulations of others to dictate my decisions. Now, armed with clarity and evidence, I could assert boundaries that were non-negotiable. As I left the cafe, a sense of empowerment replaced the heaviness I had carried for weeks. I understood that I could not save Alex from his own patterns, nor could I control Callie's manipulations. My responsibility was to myself, to protect my emotional well-being, and to honor the dignity I had fought to maintain. That evening, I made the decision to sever the emotional ties that had bound me to Alex. I would no longer allow myself to be drawn into a dynamic where my worth was questioned, where my boundaries were disregarded, and where loyalty was demanded to the detriment of my own dignity. This turning point, while painful, marked the beginning of a new chapter. The clarity I had gained through Jessica's intervention and the undeniable evidence of Callie's manipulations provided the lens through which I could view the relationship for what it truly was, a pattern of control disguised as friendship, and a partner who failed to stand with me when it mattered most. For the first time in weeks, I felt a sense of peace. Not joy, not relief, but a grounded certainty that I had acted with integrity and that integrity would guide me forward. I would move on, stronger and wiser, with a clear understanding of my own value. As I looked out at the city lights that evening, I whispered to myself, I will not be defined by this betrayal. I will not compromise who I am for someone who cannot honor me. I am enough, and I choose myself. That night, sleep came easier than it had in weeks. The darkness of betrayal was giving way to a new dawn of self-respect, clarity, and determination. And for the first time, I understood that the power to shape my life had always been in my hands. The days that followed the turning point felt surreal. It was as if the world had shifted slightly on its axis. Things I had taken for granted were now revealed in stark relief. Alex's absence, which once caused me anxiety, now felt like a protective barrier. His silence, Callie's manipulations, and even the expectations of his family had all been tests of my resolve, and I had passed. Word seemed to travel fast through the subtle networks of family and friends. Alex's parents, Linda and Robert, continued to check in, not to push me back toward reconciliation, but to ensure I was safe and grounded. Their concern was genuine, devoid of judgment, and it reinforced what I already knew. I had made the right choice. Meanwhile, the ripple effect of my departure began to manifest in the lives of those directly involved. Alex, once so confident in his control over the dynamic with Callie, began to face the consequences of his inaction. Friends who had observed the tension at the BBQ began asking questions. They had witnessed the public humiliation, the uncomfortable justifications, and the subtle signs of manipulation. Whispers grew into conversations, and conversations grew into recognition. People were starting to see the pattern I had uncovered. Callie, on the other hand, appeared unshaken on the surface, but the cracks were evident to anyone paying attention. The very control she had relied upon, the belief that she could manipulate Alex's relationships without repercussion, was beginning to erode. When Alex's closest friends and family observed her influence, they no longer accepted her narrative unquestioningly. She could still charm and persuade, but the illusion of omnipotence had been shattered. For Alex, the fallout was more personal. Friends and family began to subtly confront him, asking pointed questions about why he had allowed a friend to interfere in his life so profoundly. Each question forced him to reflect, to recognize the patterns of control he had overlooked, and to confront the uncomfortable truth that his loyalty to Callie had often been misplaced. The reality he had been insulated from, the consequences of inaction, was now impossible to ignore. From my perspective, the fallout was liberating. I no longer had to navigate the labyrinth of excuses and justifications, the endless balancing act between Alex's needs, Callie's influence, and my own boundaries. Every interaction, every message, every encounter was filtered through a lens of clarity. I was free to assert my own priorities, to make decisions without fear of judgment, and to reclaim space that had long been compromised. Even within Alex's family, the repercussions were significant. Linda and Robert had been protective for years, but their silence had often been interpreted as complicity. Now, by openly supporting my decision and validating my experience, they were signaling to Alex that the old dynamics would no longer be tolerated. The family's authority and influence, once aligned subtly with Callie, had realigned in favor of boundaries, honesty, and emotional accountability. Socially, the consequences were also tangible. Friends who had been hesitant to speak up about Callie's influence now voiced their observations. The narrative shifted from "Rachel overreacted" to "Callie's behavior is concerning, and Alex needs to take responsibility." The validation was immense, not just for my sense of justice, but for the broader understanding that manipulation often masquerades as loyalty, and discernment is critical in relationships. As for Alex and Callie, the dynamics began to unravel in ways I had anticipated. Without the tension of competition, without the challenge of my presence, Callie lost the very control that had given her power. Alex, confronted with multiple perspectives and undeniable evidence of manipulation, was forced to see the dysfunction that had been normalized for years. The foundation of their relationship, built on control, not mutual respect, was destabilizing. For me, witnessing this fallout was neither satisfying nor vengeful. I did not gloat, nor did I seek to inflict pain. The satisfaction came from the simple knowledge that truth has a way of asserting itself, that manipulative games eventually collapse under their own weight, and that I had chosen integrity over compromise. The lesson was clear: standing firm, even when difficult, protects not only oneself, but also exposes toxic dynamics for what they are. By the time I fully processed the aftermath, I had achieved a sense of detachment. Alex and Callie's world would continue without my participation, and that was entirely appropriate. The relationship that once consumed so much of my energy and attention was now a closed chapter. I had walked away, but I had done so with grace, insight, and self-respect intact. Walking through the city streets that weekend, the cold winter air felt bracing, cleansing even. Each breath reminded me that I had survived betrayal, manipulation, and heartbreak. The fallout had reached its natural conclusion. The truth was exposed, those complicit were confronted, and I had emerged unbroken. For the first time, I truly felt the freedom that comes from choosing oneself. the liberation that comes from refusing to compromise dignity for the illusion of love. The chapter of Alex and Callie was over, but the lessons it left behind would inform every decision I made moving forward. Boundaries, respect, clarity. These were no longer abstract concepts, but lived experiences. And as I walked away from the remnants of that toxic dynamic, I carried with me a sense of empowerment that no betrayal could ever take away. In the quiet aftermath, I finally allowed myself to breathe. The chaos of betrayal, manipulation, and confrontation had settled, leaving a stillness that felt both foreign and deeply comforting. For the first time in months, I wasn't analyzing every interaction or second-guessing my instincts. I simply existed, whole, resilient, and unshaken in my understanding of my own worth. Sitting at my favorite cafe, I reflected on the journey. 14 months of love, laughter, and heartbreak had taught me lessons I could never have learned otherwise. I learned to trust my instincts, to recognize manipulation even when it wore the mask of loyalty, and to honor my own boundaries above the demands of others. Most importantly, I learned that choosing myself was not selfish, it was necessary. Callie's manipulation, Alex's indecision, and the ripple effects across family and friends had shown me how toxic dynamics can persist in plain sight. I realized that emotional abuse rarely announces itself with fanfare. It creeps in through loyalty, guilt, and subtle control. And while I could not save Alex from his patterns, I could save myself by refusing to compromise my integrity or allow my life to be dictated by someone else's insecurities. There was also a deep sense of compassion that emerged from the experience. I understood that Alex had been manipulated, not inherently cruel, and that Callie's actions stemmed from her own insecurities and need for control. Recognizing this didn't excuse their behavior, but it allowed me to release lingering anger and resentment, replacing it with clarity and closure. As for my own future, the possibilities now felt limitless. I could pursue relationships rooted in mutual respect, friendships that uplifted rather than drained, and a life guided by my own values. I had been tested, and though I had felt broken at times, I emerged stronger, wiser, and more attuned to my emotional truth. The lesson I carry forward, and one I hope others can learn from, is simple yet profound. Trust yourself, protect your boundaries, and never allow the comfort of familiarity to outweigh your own dignity. Life will inevitably present challenges, betrayals, and difficult choices, but the power to navigate them with integrity lies within each of us. Looking out at the city skyline, the sun casting its first golden rays across the horizon, I felt a quiet triumph. I had walked away from what was unhealthy, stood firm in my truth, and reclaimed my life. And in that moment, I knew I was not only surviving, I was thriving. The path ahead is mine to shape, free from manipulation, guided by clarity, and grounded in the unwavering knowledge that my worth is non-negotiable. And that, perhaps, is the most powerful lesson of all.